think everybody probably knows me, but if just in case you don't. So Adrian Terheege. So I am one of a partnership of 3 in the hobby. There is my father Trevor, and then there's my partner Emma, who's also a part of the Terheege partnership. As Colin just said, originally when we first started, there was my granddad as well. So it's been very much a generational family involved in the Budgerigar hobby, and fortunately he passed away a couple of years ago. But yeah, so we're still at 3 generations. You never know. I've got my young lad. You never know. He might get involved. Obviously, as I'm sure a lot of people with children do, they give them a few birds and try and get them enticed. And at the moment, I'm trying to get him into rainbows. He's got this little rainbow that he's very proud of. He told me at the weekend, very proud of his rainbow that he bred. Unfortunately, and hopefully this doesn't go too wide. This is what you can see you filming it. But unfortunately, I showed it at the weekend, and a very senior member of the society didn't recognise it as a rainbow and got wrong classed. But you know, that's the way it goes. But thankfully, my lad wasn't there, so he didn't get too upset. I still turned up with a little rosette on the cage. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to do a presentation very much honed on recessive pieds. Over the last, less than 10 years, we've got heavily into recessive pieds, predominantly in Emma's side of the partnership. So when she joined, and really we got Emma to join because what we said to her at the time was, look, you might as well join the partnership because you're involved in the birds anyway. You might as well join the partnership, and if for the main reason that in 10, 15, 20 years time, you may want to be a judge. And if you want to be a judge, you need to go through your time served, so you might as well start that clock down. So we got her in there. Ironically, she's now got to the point of being able to qualify, and she's not interested, but you know, maybe one day. But when she got involved, initially her preferred variety were the dilutes. So she got very heavily involved in dilutes. And then that has evolved into recessive pieds, and she's a big fan of the recessive pieds. So whenever you see the recessive pieds on the show bench, it's really Emma's side of the birds that are those. And you'll see as I go through the presentation, ironically, they are one of our better families now. You'll see what I mean. So I'm going to do the presentation in 2 halves. So first question before I start, who keeps recessive pieds here? 2. That's good. Has any of you, the rest of you ever kept or bred with recessive pieds? Yeah,
Bred one once.
Okay, so that's good, because hopefully you might pick something up, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for 2 halves. And the first part of it is about the recessive pied. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to the variety, what to look for, what to look out for in terms of faults from a show perspective, the genetics, etc. So I'm going to go a little bit into about the recessive pied as a Budgerigar. And then the second part of the presentation, I'm going to go into how we've evolved and developed the Budgerigar since we've kept them, and where we've got birds from, how we've paired them, etc. We'll go into a little bit of detail about that. So that's what I'm going to do. So hopefully this all works. Is that okay? Just make sure it's okay. All right. So, to start off, we're going to go into about recessive pieds. So the recessive pied, as the description says, it's one of the different pied varieties. You've got dominant pied and you've got recessive pied. The recessive pied part obviously being the fact that the genetics of the pied are on recessive nature. I'll get more into the genetics in a moment. But the key features of a recessive pied. So, firstly, the cere of a recessive pied of a male recessive pied is the pink colour, so not blue like the majority of the normal Budgerigars. So it's pink. So that's one easy way of identifying the variety. So obviously, if you've got a dominant pied, that would be blue. Spots. The one unique thing about recessive pieds, from a show perspective, is they don't have to have spots. So you can get them fully spotted with your 6 evenly spaced spots, or you can get them all the way down to no spots at all. So the one on the picture there, for example, has got no spots at all, and that would not be a show fault if you put them on the show bench. They don't have to have spots. The body colour, so with a dominant pied, you try and have that nice stripe across the middle of the body. With a recessive pied, it's very much patches, irregular patches across the body. Predominantly more so on the lower area, but they can be all across the body. They're very much in uniform, really. They're all over the place in terms of the irregularity of the patches on the body colour. Fleshy pink feet. The eye, black with no iris. That's really important. You'll see, I've got a slide in a moment, but you'll see that you can, if people pair dominant pied to dominant pied, quite often that will result in a variegated body markings, and they do look quite similar to a recessive pied. So there's two key ways of identifying it. One, as I say, is the seer, because it would be blurred if it was in the males, but the other is the eye, and the eye is the most important thing. Is to check the eye, because if it was dominant pied, it had an iris. With a recessive pied, it has no iris. So that's the main way of identifying if it's a recessive pied or not. The wing markings, again, very irregular. It doesn't, like the normal where it has it up, the markings all the way through the wing. A recessive pied will have a proportion of markings on the wing. Now, the standard states that it should be 10 to 20% of that wing should have the markings. Not too dissimilar to the one on the picture, actually. So that's the good level of wing markings, is 10 to 20%. Flights, yellow or white, but basically you do still get the odd one with a dark flight in there. And actually that's not actually defined as a fault. And likewise with the tail. So that's the recessive pied. Obviously hens exactly the same, so there's no difference between, other than the seer, there's no difference in cocks and hens. What you do tend to find though with hens is typically the wing markings carry a lot bit heavier marking. Normally you would see, you can tell quite quickly, typically in the nest box, your hens, because they'll tend to have a lot darker wing markings. But other than that, they look exactly the same. The other part of the recessive pied genetics is the dark-eyed clear. Now, the dark-eyed clear is pure in colour, so very similar to double factor spangle, very similar to albino lutino. So they just have the pure yellow or white body colour. Now, if I just quickly, I'll go through the appearance of it first, and I'll talk more about the genetics. So in this instance, the main differentiator, really the only real main differentiator, is the eye. Again, clues in the name, dark-eyed clear, so it has a dark eye, no iris, exactly the same as the recessive pied. So it's dark eye, no iris. Ironically, you were just talking about the judges' test. This was a question that came up on the judges' test at the weekend. And that is, how do you tell the difference between a dark-eyed clear, a double factor spangle, and an albino? So the dark-eyed clear, black, no iris. Obviously, albino and lutino will have a red eye with an iris, and a double factor spangle will have a dark eye with an iris. So that's the difference. So dark-eyed clear, dark eye, no iris. Other than that, it's very similar, to be honest, to a lutino in that, again, pink cere and pure body colour.
Have you actually got any in your stuff?
No. Slightly touchy subject, that one, Carl, so thank you. So I've been trying for actually, lockdown always wipes out the time scales of everything, doesn't it? So 4 years probably now, I've been trying to get dark-eyed clears into the stud. So initially I bought a dark-eyed clear is a recessive pied and a clear flight. Yeah, that is what is a dark-eyed clear. So it has to have the recessive pied genetics and the clear flight genetics. The clear flight being a type of dominant pied, but a different variety. It's a clear flight. So when you pair those together and the bird carries both of those genetics, the dark-eyed clear will come out. So, coming back to your question, so 4 or 5 years ago I bought a clear flight, split recessive pied out of the show at Bogbrook. It was a hen. It wasn't very good, but it was a clear flight that was split recessive, so I'll use that, pair it into my good recessives, get some dark-eyed clears. Bred loads of young off it, not one dark-eyed clear. Bred recessives, I've bred pieds, not one dark-eyed clear. Was it a clear flight? I now question. So then, last year, good old Sue Clark, we all love Sue Clark, she gave me a dark eye clear. She managed to get some, and I gave her back some recessives because they've gone down. So I got the dark eye clear, again, little thing, but beautiful little bird, but only a little thing. Put it in the green cage, bred with it all year. Struggled with the hens messed me about. Finally got fertility, we dropped it. And I lost everything. So I still haven't got a dark eye clear. I'm on a waiting list. I've contacted somebody on the waiting list, so maybe one day. But
there's just not many of them around.
There's not many of them around. There are a couple, like recessive pieds though. Recessive pieds are going up in quality very quickly. Over the last 10 years, they've gone up very quickly. I think those who have got dark eye clears will bring them up quickly. I've seen some pictures certainly this year of dark eye clears, and they're moving very quickly upwards. So I think we will start seeing some good ones soon, especially if some of the people who have got really good recessive pieds start getting some of those in as well. And the good thing with a dark eye clear, of course, like with a good thing with a double factor spangle, is it's not going to carry flecking, which recessives are quite prone to. It's not going to carry the other faults that recessive pieds have. So you know, it gives you a little bit of a benefit from that perspective.
Is the colour always a rich colour, or if it's got cinnamon ink in it?
Yeah, I think you can still get a bit like lieutenants. I think you still can get the cinnamon markings come through.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't seem to happen in double factor spangles, does it?
No, not so much.
You
But then they get more blue tinge.
Cinnamon blood in them, and there was yellow.
Yeah, they are. But you do still get a bit of the more body colour to double factor, don't you?
Yeah.
Not quite so much in lieutenant. It's more of a tinge rather than patches on double factors. So that's the dark eye clear. Like I say, the key differentiator is the eye. Dark eye, no iris. Right. Split recessive pieds. So recessive pieds, like I say, are obviously a recessive gene. With them, either bird, so the male or the female, can carry the recessive gene. So it's not a sex-linked variety. It's not like cinnamons or opalines or red eyes. It's just a standard recessive gene. So basically, either the cock or the hen can carry the recessive gene. You need the recessive gene on both parents, therefore, and when those recessive genes cross, then you'll breed a visual recessive pied. Now, the problem with any variety that carries a recessive gene is identifying them, because obviously you've got a bird that looks basically just like a normal or any normal variety. How do you know that's carrying the recessive gene? And I would say, if I'm wrong, probably every variety in that stage you can't, with the exception of recessive pieds. Sometimes. So on some recessive pieds, split recessive pieds, like this one, it's a normal bird, but it still has a patch on the back of its head. And that's how you will know that that bird is going to be split recessive pied. Now, my experience, and I don't know if this is, you know, how true this is, but only on my experience of them, it seems to be very hereditary. It's very much a family trait. So some family lines are quite heavy, they always carry the patch. Some they never do. I don't know what you found, Carl, if you find that, but
don't often get it. No.
You don't often get the patch still. It's quite frustrating. But on the positive side, for example, this year, I paired one of my best normal cocks to a split recessive hen. The first young one came out, had a patch on the back of its head. Now the chance of, you know, in theory, you should not know if any of those are going to be split or not until you pair them up. Thankfully, in that case, I can now tell that one's going to be split. So that was one of ours a few years ago, and you can clearly see the patch on the back of its head. So that must be split. Right. So faults. So there's, from a colour standards perspective, there's two faults that are specific to the recessive pied. The first one, obviously flecking. It's not specific, but flecking, obviously ridge fault. The reason I've called flecking out on this presentation, though, is they do tend to be more prone on recessive pieds. Flecking seems quite a big problem on recessive pieds. Predominantly down to the variation. You know, the fact that those markings are quite variegated across the body. You know, it appears just from the head, and that then links to the main feature, which is this thing called zebra markings. And the zebra markings is where you've got, I think you can just see a bit here. You've got the the markings on the normal markings on the back of the head that come further round on the frontal crown. And you can see here there's zebra markings, which then is moved into what we would naturally call flecking. These zebra markings that come round onto the frontal crown. That is a fault, recessive pied fault. It should be penalised as a result. The other fault, which I already touched on, is the wing markings. So the wing markings, the standard says 10 to 20% of wing marking. You can see, for example, this recessive pied, which is one of Sam Wilde's, sort of say. I don't think I've got his permission to use it, so Sam Wilde's, you can see quite heavy on the wing markings. If not, almost 100% on the wing markings. So that again.
The little bird would still be a good stock bird.
Oh, it's a cracking. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest you don't use it. Like I say, I think it's very much. Just because you've got a bird, typically again, just because you've got a bird with heavy wing markings, doesn't mean the young are going to come up with heavy wing markings, in my opinion. If you feel it could, you can always pair it to a recessive pied. That will tend to tone it down a bit. There is an exception to that, though, again, in my experience, and that is I know one family line that's been in the UK, and I won't mention whose it is, but there's one family line that I've seen in the UK that typically always had very, very dark wing markings. And I think that's just the line that it was, and it came, I believe, from South Africa. And they do typically have very heavy wing markings, and that, all the young, that's a very difficult one, therefore, to breed out. From what I've seen and what I've experienced, and I have got some of that family, so I'm talking from a bit of experience. What I should do, I've just looked at that picture again. What I should do is have a chat with Sam, because he's got problems with bars. The third fault, I've already touched on it, is the double factor dominant pied. So that is a dominant pied, that isn't a recessive pied. Yeah, if you went like that, you'd say that's a recessive pied. But it's not, it's a dominant pied. And the reason you know it's a dominant pied, it's got a very clear iris. Very clear iris. It's also got a blue cere. Ironically, the cere on that picture is going a little bit pink, but blue cere, but it's got a very, very clear iris, so it's a dominant pied. And that would be a double factor dominant pied. So that's what I'm saying, that where people are pairing dominant pied to dominant pied, when they're double factored up, they quite often will come out with quite variegated body markings.
Adrian, on that dominant pied, as you said, people are putting dominant pieds to dominant pieds. To get the pretty coloured bird, they've also banged recessive pieds into them, and then all of a sudden, with beginners, you've probably seen it on the bench, you think it's a recessive pied, and you're always told, turn the bird around. One eye's dark, and the other one's got an iris.
Yes, you're right. Odd-eyed pied, you're quite right.
Oh,
so that is another fault, is where you've got the odd-eyed pied, and you've got one with an iris and one without an iris. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've seen that.
I've seen it loads of
times. Yeah, I've seen it on the show bench as well.
Loads of times.
Yeah, you're quite right.
It's caught a few judges out, hasn't it?
It has. It has
as well.
Yeah, you're quite right.
I mean, you shouldn't really pair double factor dominant pied.
There's a lot of things, Colin, that you say you shouldn't, because it's the pretty colour boys, isn't it?
It's a shame, because it's first of all it ruins the dominant pied.
The only thing on that point, though, is a question for you guys. I don't know if anyone's done it, because I was asked this question, and the view was, take a double factor spangle, for example. If you've got double factor spangle, you pair it back to a spangle, you typically get better wing markings out of the double factor spangle, is what I've found.
It's true.
From what I was told, is when you breed out of a double factor pied, you tend to get better pied markings out of it. So maybe there is something in it, if that is true. But you're right though, Cole, once you've got the double factor pied, from a show perspective at least, it's not really much use to you, from a show perspective.
Well, I think size suffers as well, doesn't it, in the long run, if you keep...
Possibly.
Yeah.
Depends how good it is, right?
Who decided the percentage markings on the wing?
The people who set the standards, WBO, I guess it is, but yeah.
Where do you start from? To decide, it's got to be 20%.
Just can't answer that, I don't know the history of it.
Most of the ends you see on the bench are like that, though, aren't they?
Yeah. The middle one.
Just slightly less down towards the flights. But up on the shoulders,
25 points. Colour 15, except for a dark eye clear, that's 40. And the reason for that is there's no variety markings on a dark eye clear, so that's 0. I mean, ultimately they both add up together, but they're split for the recessive and just on colour for the dark eye clear. That's what the judge should be judging against. So obviously it should, in theory, be weighted more to, well, the colour has a big proportion of it, 40% of it, then you've got the rest of it is the actual size of the bird. So, the judge's dilemma with recessive pieds. A lot of people don't like judging recessive pieds because they can be quite frustrating. There was a bird, which you've seen a picture of it, I think in a minute, of mine that I showed last year, and we got a lot of grief for it. Quite rightly as well, in a sense, because it was flecked. But it did win. So, what would you do? Open it up to you guys. So here's 4 birds, 4 recessive pieds. First one, cobalt recessive pied. And I appreciate you going off the picture. So let's just go with me. So it's good size. You can clearly see it's got good wing markings for the variety, but it's flecked and has got these zebra markings. You've got another cobalt recessive pied, again good size, this time though beautifully clean. It has actually also got spots, not that it's important, but it has got spots. But it's got very heavy wing markings, very heavy for a male as well, for a cockbird. You've got a grey-green recessive pied, has a quality of a budgerigar, it's good, it's got nice good width. I appreciate it's not spotted out, but again, forget that. So it's got a good width of face, it's got very clean head. Slightly heavy wing markings, but not too bad. But it is quite small. You can see the board itself is quite small. And then the 4th one, you've got wonderful width of face, really nice directional feather. It's a really big bird, but as a recessive pied, it's very heavy marked. You can't see the wing, but it's very, very heavily marked, and it's badly flecked, and it's got the zebra markings. So, there you go then. A, B, C, D. Which one would you put first?
first one.
The first one.
C.
C.
B.
B. B. B. B. Wow. So, firstly, 3 of you you've gone for 3 different birds. None of you gone for D. I don't think. None of you said D. None of you said D. So, from a budgerigar perspective, which one do you think is the best?
B.
B. No, D.
Oh,
Sorry.
no,
D's the best one. So from a breed in your age group, yeah, D's the best one. But you discount that one. You've all discounted that one from a show perspective. So get that. It's really poor recessive pied, but it is the best budgie. But so the majority of it went with B. So why are you going with B?
Well, I would say the wing fault is less than the flecking. I don't know what the points difference is.
Well, there isn't. It's a. So you've took them all out and don't award anything. So you got the variety markings of 25, but then flecking's not. It's just a fault, isn't it? You're supposed to penalise it severely. So here you penalise it severely because that's over the standard of what we would deem acceptable, and with that one. So these you need to penalise. So now you're just going on the scale of points. But what's penalised severely? How much would you penalise for flecking? So it's very difficult. I mean, there's no right answer. There is no right answer.
As a judge, what would you do?
What would I do?
Yeah, well, what would be your decision? It's obviously between B and C. So.
Yes, it is, and I'll go. Me personally, and I know the birds. I'll go with C.
Hey,
I'll go with C.
I've got something right.
Because to me, these to me, they're both heavy on wing markings. Yes, this is heavier. They're both heavy on wing markings. They're still both clean. This one's got a bit more size than that one, but for me that's a better bird in the head, and I tend a little bit towards the head. So I would go with C. Out of interest, just so these are 2 we've bred. That's one we've bought in, and that's not one of my birds. That's bred me some of the best birds I've got. that became a colour champion, and I don't think that ever won. So if that helps not, but that one did do quite well on the show, but it's probably one of the worst recessive pieds I've bred as an actual budgie. But yeah, it's very difficult. Judging recessive pieds are quite difficult because you've got so many things to consider when it comes to judging recessive pieds. Okay, so breeding expectations. I won't go into labour this too much because it can be quite complicated. There's lots of numbers, but in simple terms, if you pair a recessive pied to a recessive pied, you're going to just breed recessive pieds. Really easy. 100% recessive pieds. If you pair a recessive pied to a split recessive pied, you're going to get 50-50. 50-50 recessives, 50-50 splits. The good thing with that pair is you know that every bird that comes out that's not a recessive pied will be split. So it's carrying the genes. So that's good from a breeding perspective because you know what you've got. Recessive pied to non-recessive pied, again, you know everyone's going to be split because everyone's going to be carrying, that's going to pass on the recessive gene to every youngster. Yeah, so you know everyone's going to be split. Then you get into where it's a little bit harder from a breeding record perspective, if you like. Split recessive pied to a split recessive pied, you're going to get 25% of them are not going to be carrying the split gene. So in other words, 75% of them are going to look like normal birds, 50% will be split and 25 won't be. And then you split to a non, 50% non, 50% split. And again, all of those will look like normals. Now if you're lucky, you will have them come out with a patch on the back of the head. That's if you're lucky. But as close as you're breeding them, quite often they won't. Same with me, to be honest, quite often, depending on what family line, they won't either. So it really depends. People have different views. Some people say if the bird's good enough, don't worry about it. If you get a recessive will drop out at some point, great. If you're not bothered about recessive pieds, just use the quality of the bird. People who want to breed recessive pieds and keep that line going will tend to go more around these top three parents because you haven't got wastage, if you like, because you know what they're going to be. I'll tell you how we do it in a minute. But that's the pairings. And again, as I've said before, it's not sex linked, so it doesn't matter if it's cock or hen. All the cocks and hens are the same thing. There we go. So that's the first part. So any other questions on the variety itself?
Just going back to the.
Improve the size.
Go on, you go on.
You want to improve the size and the quality of the recessive pied. What would be the ideal pairing?
Hold that thought. I'll come on to that in a minute. So I'll hold that thought for a minute because I'll tell you how we've done it, and I think that'll answer that. Yeah, but I'll make sure I do answer that, but I don't say in a minute.
Adrian, the previous slide, like that's the next one, right? I mean, looking at them, at the moment I've got the first one, like recessive pied to recessive pied. I've got recessive pied to split, and I've also got the split to split. Like, and my better birds have come out of the splits.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I've got there's 6 chicks. There's 4 recessive pieds, which all look like hens, and the 2 splits have got the dots on the back of the head.
I think that's a similar question, isn't it? I think it depends on the quality of the birds that you pair up, in my opinion. So I would assume your splits are better than your recessives that you got paired up, and therefore your recessives can't work.
The bloodlines are there. I mean, the ends from Ellis and Matthew, and the cock comes through a Nicola bird, which John got, didn't you? The one that you got at Mason and they said, oh, we think it's recessive pied, it's out of Miller's. Well, Miller turns round and says, I've never had a recessive pied in my shed. Right, but it's got the white dot on the head. And I've had 2 birds like that. Right? Yeah, look, I've had 2 birds in my shed, right? And I've not bred a recessive pied out of any of the actual ones with the dots on the head, like this miller bird and another one that I haven't. The chicks that are bred like by putting them either to a pied, yeah, I've got recessive pieds out of them.
The logical question to that is that you look at the dot on the back of their head. Some of the ones we've seen, particularly at Barry Matthews,
It's only one feather.
It's literally been one feather.
Yes.
Which is so that seems, I don't know your experience, that seems to vary. So and the pictures you used, it's almost like a dolly pied.
Yeah, different. So I've got somewhere that is literally one feather. So I've the fact, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think that it's over time that feather might have gone away. But you know, you would literally just have to pull one feather out and show it, and
it's a normal.
It's a normal, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think. I think again, it's probably down to just the family line.
But it's interesting what you just said. Like the feather went away because one of them went on mine. All of a sudden it molted and it hasn't come back.
Yeah. It's interesting you say about the Miller thing though, because I mean I don't know if Richard's got recessive or not, but I certainly know he hasn't shown any or that I'm aware of. But I bought. Don't ask me why, but I bought a crested a couple of years ago, and just out of sheer, just because I did, I paired it to a split recessive pied.
And out pops a recessive.
And out popped loads of recessive pieds.
Yeah.
So I contacted the bloke I bought it for. I says, I can't believe this. I've bred loads of recessive pieds. He says, no, you haven't. He says, I've had that family line for 7 generations. I haven't bred a never put a recessive pied into it. He says, I'm telling you now. Here's a picture. These have all come out and they're all recessive pieds. So he didn't know he had recessive pieds in there either. But eventually it popped out.
It's like Tom and Andrew, isn't it?
But
they're duffer.
At the end of the day, if you didn't do what I did and just so happened to pair it back into a recessive pied line, how would the chance of you almost breeding it? Yeah, I know Harry used to. He'd buy birds in from Europe, and all of a sudden he's opened the box and they've got patches on the back of their head. So, yeah.
I think it's one variety that where there's so many birds being used by people, like they're going to pop out
and they're getting
of
so good
any
now.
birds.
They're getting
Yeah.
so good now.
Yeah.
So, and you'll see in a minute, they're getting so good. Why would you not just use them as normals? And then if they pop out, they pop out. If they don't, and then somebody will buy one and it'll pop out.
Going back to the black-eyed bird that you had,
Yeah.
you said it was a small bird. Is there a different show standard for that bird? Could you have showed that bird
Could it show?
without like him chucking it out?
No, yes, it's a different. So it goes in the same. It goes in the same classification as the recessive pied, but there is a different standard. So it doesn't have to have any wing light. You wouldn't penalise it because it's a different variety in essence.
Because it's that variety,
It's that
a
variety.
different class.
Yeah, it's in the same class as recessive.
Right.
You keep it. You wouldn't penalise it because it looks well like it should. At the rare shows, they have a separate class. Same CC, but they have a different class. But you don't see many of them, to be honest.
They're so rare, aren't
Yeah,
they?
and they are typically very, very small. The reason you don't really see them in the recessive pied classes is they can't compete because of the size of the dog. But that's really only, I'm not being disrespectful to anybody, but really only down to the quality of those people who've got them and the level that they've been able to get them to. I do believe that I can't see any reason at all why that variety can't get as good as the recessive pieds. It's just in there. It's just a recessive pied just happens to have that genetic in it as well.
But I mean, over the years, people have tried to have a clear wings, haven't they? And they've brought them up to a certain standard.
But then look at Dave White.
And then they seem to regress, yeah.
But then look at Dave White. Now all of a sudden you've got someone who's really top of the game. He brings them in, and all of a sudden they're right up there. So
Yeah. But I think it's because of his normals and his spangles
Yeah,
are so good.
yeah, absolutely.
You can get away with it for a while, but they do regress, don't they?
I think you've got to, if you really want to, you've got to concentrate on them, and that's one reason why I think ours have moved forward fairly quickly is because of the scale at which we're pushing for recessive pieds. No, we're not, that was,
How many recessive pieds have you actually got? Because most people would have a couple of pairs floating about in the evergreen.
great leading. That's perfect leading. So, let's talk about our recessive pieds. So, we have 21. So Emma, when Emma set up, we built her own aviary. So we've got our own aviary, which is there, and we put, before my granddad passed away, obviously he packed up with the birds, I took all his cages off him. He had some of the Trespa cages and he had 21. So I put all of those cages into this aviary, so there's 21 breeding cages. We use 20 of them. One of them hasn't even got a hole for a nest box. We use 20 of the breeding cages. Preempting, well, jumping ahead to what I'm going to talk about in a minute, but this year we made the decision, because the recessive pieds had progressed quite well, we would dedicate the whole aviary to recessive pieds. Previously we'd split it and we had this block over here of 12 cages to recessive pieds and the other block to dilutes. But what we said was, well, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to just push the dilutes into the normals and just mix them in and use them as normals, and we'll just focus on recessive pieds. So, to answer your question, 20 breeding cages, that's 40. Carry, what, dozen spare hens, and we'd like more than that, but about a dozen spare hens. A couple of spare cocks, so what's that, 60 birds, and that's not including all the young we've bred this year. Emma's used, so we bought her 80 rings, she's used all those, and she's still got young popping out now, so she's bred quite a few. So that's the setup. Other than that, it's similar to everything else I do in my other aviary, but only difference here, plastic cages, Trespa nest boxes, just because that's what my granddad had. We've got exactly the same in both aviaries. We've got well, actually it's an old picture, but we've got a double push around, top and bottom push around, and yeah, ventilation, so airflow going through it and pushing in and out, and that's the setup. So the approach to pairing. So our preferred pairing for recessive pieds is recessive pied to split. So most of the pairs that we would put up would be recessive pied to split. Predominantly so that A, we know all the young that aren't recessives are going to be splits, and also to increase the amount of recessives which you get out. So that's the predominant pair we use, and we've tried to keep them as close together as we can. So we've had different, and I'll go through year by year in a minute, a little timeline of everything that's happened, but we try and keep the recessive lines fairly close knit. We don't cross them over too much, to be honest. So we try and keep them fairly straight through. And then what we do, to answer your point, is we will then bring in some of my normals, so some of the normals, to try and bring up the size. So to be honest, we've tended, certainly in the early years, we tended to do that towards the end of the breeding season. So I finished doing what I wanted to do. I've bred the birds I wanted to breed for the shows. I'd then take some of my better birds, especially my cocks, and say, right, you can have a round with a recessive now, and we'll see if we can just bump them up a bit. So that's what we started to do. Ironically, with the exception of one normal that I can think of, which was a yellow face cinnamon grey we bought from Bowker's, with the exception of that one bird, typically by doing that hasn't made a lot of difference to us moving forwards. What's really done the difference is the quality of the outcrosses we bought, recessive pied outcrosses we bought. That's actually what's done the difference. But that's how I would, to keep them going up, that's what I would do, is bring in some good normals. So like for example this year I've paired this hen, which is one of our better split hens and has bred me a really good bird, you'll see in a minute. And I paired her to one of the best cocks I've got, and like I say, the first one I bred came out as a split. But I didn't really do that to bring the recessives up, I really did that actually to bring my normals up, because I know what she's been capable of breeding. But that's where we've got to, getting to the conclusion now already, but that's sort of where we've got to, is I'm now starting to use the recessives to bring up the normals rather than the other way around. But that's typically what I would do, is I'd pair normals in to bring them up. But I'd always pair them to a recessive, because I know all the young will splits.
You try and avoid cinnamon or opaline at all?
No, I would like to avoid opaline. Well, yes, I would like to avoid both. Emma likes cinnamon recessives, so we've got loads of cinnamon recessive. Opaline, we've got opalines, and I don't really want opalines, I can help it. As much as an opaline is my favourite variety, they've got so many faults that add to the faults of a recessive pied, like flecking. I don't see how that's going to help them. and you don't need the spot size, which Opines typically breed either because they don't need spots. So yeah, I would prefer not to have Opines in there, but I have. Way to bring the wing markings down in that family. So like I said, I have got one of these birds that I've brought in from this family that I believe is genetically always carrying heavy wing markings. And I paired that to a recessive to try and bring it down. Hasn't worked, it's still got really strong wing markings. But that would be really the only reason we would typically pair recessive to recessive. And I don't see no success in getting dark eye clears in there. So that's how we do it. That's what we typically do. So when a couple of years after we started, we decided what we're trying to achieve, and I saw this picture and I thought, that's what I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to achieve recessive pieds, that's a bar head, they pop out the nest box that look like that. That's what I'm trying to get to. Don't know what your view is, but I think that is an unbelievable Budgerigar and an unbelievable recessive pied. So that's what we're striving for. And every year I do this sort of presentation, I always start with that. We'll see how we're progressing. So I'm going to take you on a little timeline. So we started in 2013, so I'm going to take you through the last 9 years. So we started in recessive pieds in 2013. We had one pair. And the young of that bird. So we decided, you know what, we're going to get into recessive pieds, and we wanted to get into recessive pieds. We heard of a beginner with Birmingham who wanted to get a shot of their recessive pieds. They had one pair, two blue recessives, cock and hen, and all the young they'd bred. I think most of them were still bar heads at the time. So we went up there and we bought them off them. Got them home, checked the rings. Both of the parents were Paulinicus Stannard. So that was a bit of a bonus. Being Stannard's wrong. The thing with them though, they were very, very small birds. Not colour budgie size, but for an exhibition budgie, they were quite short in the body. They had lovely faces, they had lovely feather around the head, but they were really badly flecked. And of course, what they'd done is they'd paired the two recessives together, and all the young were really badly flecked. So what we did is we thought, right, we've got to get going, so we'll put those pairs together, we'll compare them to the normals, because that's the only option we had, and try and breed some splits. So that's all we could do, that's all we had. They're the only birds we had, that's what we tried to do. At the time, I think we also did bring some Malamaica as well, but they didn't really go, take us where we wanted to go. So, pairing the young back together the year after, you've seen that picture a few times now, we came out with this. So, the very first recessive pied we ever bred. We put the size on really quick. We managed to get the size through the splits, put the size on really quickly. This was the typical style of the head that they had, but like I say, they were down here, the birds we bought. But we just couldn't clean them up. The flecking was a real problem. But I don't think it was too bad a start from the quality of the budgie, but the flecking was a real problem. And we carried on and bred a few more, and it was just fleck bird after fleck bird, and it was really quite bad. And the trouble was, we'll try and show them, and as you guys pointed out when you did that exercise at the beginning, it's not going to win because it's flecked, and it's not that good. So we thought, well, how are we going to improve? What are we going to do? Because they're the only family of recessives we've got. It's going to take us years to clean them up through the normals. So at the time, Simon Gage had lovely, stylish, clean recessive pieds. Really, really nice, stylish, clean recessive pieds. So we went down to see him, and we bought some more, and just focused on the cleanest, nicest looking. It doesn't matter too much on the quality of the bird. Obviously, we picked better good, but the priority was good wing markings, clean head. That's what we did. So we did that. So we took them and we paired those up to the birds that we'd already got, and we tried to clean them up, and we did. We managed to clean them up to a much better standard, but the feather quality dropped quite quickly as well. We got the finer feather, and it's just the typical, isn't it? You're jumping backwards and forwards trying to get the ideal win, and you're moving around. And we still haven't got that many. We haven't got that many recessive pieds. So we were happier But like I said, the head quality dropped, and they just weren't really progressing where we wanted to get to. They were nice. Is probably the best way to put it. So that sort of then culminated with 2017, where we had an absolute disaster. We only bred two recessive pieds out of what we've got. It just wasn't working at all. Trying to dabble with them, if you like, in my main aviary. Sort of the same point you're making. Unless you've got a decent number of pairs, they're going to go back. You're going to struggle to develop them. They're going to go backwards. You know, it's a side project. It wasn't really getting where I wanted to. And that was the point where we bit the bullet and said, tell you what, we're going to set up the second aviary and we're going to put some more pairs of recessive pieds. So that's what we did. As I say, we put in the 12 pairs of dilutes, recessives, and 9 pairs of dilutes, or 8 pairs. The other thing we did, and it's interesting you said you got some from Barry, is we also went down to Barry. I think that was the year he won. He had a cobalt recessive that I think he was certainly getting the baby CCs with. Really nice cobalt recessive pied at the time. So we went down to see Barry. And we managed to pick up some nice outcrosses from Barry. I think that was sort of one of the sort of birds he had. Again, a bit similar to what we had at the start. Really nice feather quality on them. Some of them were coming out flecked, but or were quite flecked, but they really had a nice feather quality. And they were going back to that family that he was just winning with. The other thing we'd done, so they were 2 Barry Matthews birds. The other thing we did was I don't know why we keep doing it, we keep buying birds from out of the show book, and we bought that hen. Now I can't recall for the life of me whose ring that was, but we bought that recessive hen. It wasn't anything special by any means, but we needed some more blood and we needed some more recessives, so we bought them hen. And then we started to see where we get to with the new aviary going forwards. So in 2018, it went from a disaster in 2017 to just sheer luck, to be honest, in 2018. And we paired that, I'm sure it was that hen, to this yellow face cinnamon grey that I had a couple of years, which I bought from the Bowkers. And it just clicked. The Barry Matthew birds into Bowkers, for some reason, we were shocked, it just clicked. And we bred 12 splits out the family, out the pair. I think there was only 2 or 3 cocks. I think you had one, 2 or 3 cocks. And all the rest were hens. This hen being an absolute stonker of a hen, and that's her as a bar head, but she was absolutely stunning. And this cock, that unfortunately I think I had to cut his ring off when he was in the nest box. But I decided it was more important to keep the bird than risk it, to keep the ring on. I had to cut the ring off. But bred some really good hens. They're all splits, really good birds. So we thought that we could really move this forwards. But being who we are and how we want to progress quickly, we still want, it's still going to take a few years to breed those in. It just so happened that that sort of point in time, we actually got, or I think my dad got, invited to judge in Belgium. And he went over to Belgium judging, and he obviously met a few of the people over there. And one of those people that he got to meet was Martin Halen. And we talked to Martin Halen, and we managed to get the opportunity to buy some birds off him. So what we did was, once when we'd been producing birds that were, and this is that bird, the same bird that I suppose you guys picked as the one you would have picked out those 4. So that's him again. You can see he was actually fully spotted, but it wasn't anything special. And that's the sort of birds we were breeding, especially off the one out the specialist and rare pair. But and we did, we were doing quite well on the show bench with that style of bird, but they weren't the sort of, they're miles away from that ideal. They're miles away from that where I had that picture. So there's nowhere near where we want to be. They're winning, but that's because there wasn't a lot of competition. And they're nice, but they're not really where we want to be. So we went over to see Martin Halen. and I bought two birds. I bought this one, which you saw the picture of at the start, and I also bought this cinnamon, which was split. So I bought 2 birds. The cinnamon was a massive thing. I bred one off it and it died. This one, so bear in mind I bought this in 2019, it bred 2019, 2020, 2021, and it dropped dead in the breeding cage this year. So he did really well. So we went over and we brought in some birds from Martin Hayden. And paired into that yellow-faced family of Barrett, Ellis and Matthews, it just started to come together. And so we started to get the birds with slightly better faces. And so this bird here, you'll see it in a minute. We started to breed the birds with much nicer faces, and that it paired in really well. The Ellis Matthews to the Martin Hayden line, it mated in really well. The other thing we were doing at the same time was that hen from which I bought especially from Rare Show was still breeding, and she was still breeding exactly the same style of birds that she bred the year before. Fully spotted, which is fantastic. Although they don't need to be, it's nice to have them fully spotted. It's beautiful and clean, a nice styly bird. But we started to get the pairings a bit better in 2019. We had some better splits pairing them out from that Balka line, and the quality started to get up a little bit. And so we bred the violet cinnamon recessive. You can see on there. There was a couple of others as well off that same hen. And that culminated in, so that's the bar head that I just showed you, and I'm sure people possibly remember that hen from a couple of years ago at the club show. Went on to win the CC at the club show. Now, quite a controversial bird, because that would have been an interesting one to put that in that 4 birds to see which way you would have gone. Because lovely hen, slightly flecked, terrible wing markings on it. Terrible wing markings on it. I know one one individual in the hobby who's very well known, and again won't mention names, was not very happy that was winning, because it's a terrible variety content. But it was a super hen. I mean, you can see the side of it, super hen. And that was off the Martin Hayden cock, paired into this hen. So yeah, they did really well. And the other good thing was, by the fact we went into the new age, we bred 60 young out of those 11 cages. So we jumped quite a bit in 1 year, thanks to that bird from Martin Hayden. In 2020, we managed to get back over to Martin Hayden again. We managed to pick up another outcross. In fact, I actually picked up 2. One he gave me, he was very kind with, and I managed to pick this one up. Now this one, he put in the cage for, I can remember, he put it in the cage for me, so I want Recessive Pieds to get the can. He put this, it was a baby bird, put it in the cage. I went, wow, okay. He's like, yeah, he says, I think I'll let this one go because it won't grow a tail. It's no good to me, I can't show it won't grow a tail. So I let that one go. And I thought, I don't even know how much it is yet, but I've got to have that bird because it's just a super recessive pied. So I ended up bringing that cock back. That following year, paired into what was that paired into the same family, so I didn't cross them over. I paired it, but I did pair them back into the Ellis and Matthews, and I bred a few really good splits again. So there's these pictures of the same birds, but basically, in particular, 2 brothers. I don't know if anybody was either at Northampton last year or was at the event yesterday, the weekend. But that Cobalt cock won Best in Show at Northampton last year. Only time it'd been out. Split recessive. And I got this cock out a couple of times well, and it was doing well. So again, the line, the Ellis and Matthews into the Martin Hayden, it worked straight away, made a huge difference. But it is big thanks to the Ellis Matthews side as well. The grey-green recessive, so I still have the grey-green recessive report in off mine in Hayland. And he bred me four very nice recessive pies. But I made a really bad pairing that year. I mean, you saw the cock, very clean but small, as I said. I paired him to a badly flecked yellow-faced boiler, I think it was. And he was badly flecked hen, and all the young came out badly flecked. It's a really, in hindsight, it was a really silly pairing. But this bird I showed last year, and it won at the Dogbook show. It won at a couple of other shows, and again, very controversial because it's badly flecked. But massive head, massive, fantastic bird. So, for a lesson for you to take away though, so you're not going to take anything away from what I say, take away this. So, I showed that bird at MBA Specialist and Rare, and in the Yorkshire class, and it won, I think it won the CC. That was on the Sunday. Kate brought it home and thought, right, that's it now. Shows are done. It's breeding season time. Get it in the breeding cage. So I worked out what hen I wanted to pair it to. And for me, it was obvious. It was going to be the it was the sister to them, I think it was. Obvious pairing. That's what I'm going to pair up in the cage. Sorted out all my birds, and it's a bit of a rush, sorting out all my birds, because we're going on holiday the following day. So, paired it up, got it in the breeding cage, thought, I'll go on holiday, then come back, I'll put the nest box on, everything's good. When I went on holiday, came back, right, let's get these nest boxes on. The cock's not there. Why is the cock not there? So I contact the guy who looked after the birds, this cage, so-and-so, there's only one bird in there. Yeah, it died. The cock died. You know, a little bit upset. Okay, but it's not his fault. You know, he's not a budgie man, so he does the best he can. And I really appreciate it. So not, you know, but just one of them things. So I'm kicking myself, and I'm thinking, why on earth that died? I don't know. And I'm looking around. You know, you're a bit upset. You're pacing backwards and forwards. And why on earth could that have died? And I looked in the cage. And yep, there's the hen. Yep, yeah, nothing else in there. The hen's went away. And I stood there thinking, hang on a minute. So it's not right there. I went back to the cage and went, yeah, the hen's in there, nothing else is in there. There's nothing else in there. There's no seed in here. I went away on holiday for a week and didn't get any seed. The hen survived, but the cock died. So, lesson. When you go on holiday, make sure you give your bird seed. The guy, I said, didn't have any seed, did it? Oh, I don't know, I didn't notice. Okay. Good news is, though, I won't get criticised for showing it again because it's not right. I've still got these though, so these are bred, but again, the trouble with those was I can't get them on the show, but even if I wanted to, I mean, they're flecked again, I wouldn't want to really show them, to be fair. They weren't quite the quality of the one I was showing. Also, one of them doesn't have flights on one wing and the other one doesn't have a tail. And whereas the one that died was perfect. But the good news is I've still got some of them, so the family line's still going, and I still had the dad at the time. So that brings me to what year is it? 21. Yeah, 21. Of course it is. 21. It's all right. I'm getting confused for a minute. So that brings us to last year. So last year. Both cocks still going, so both recessives going, and they continue to produce really good birds. So this time, what I decided to do was I took the hen that I wanted to pair to the grey-green that died, and I paired it to the blue recessive cock, and it bred her. Now that is absolutely clonking bird. I don't know if anyone's seen it in person. It was at the show at the weekend. That's the bird that was on the front cover of Budgie recently. Absolutely massive thing. nightmare to get on the perch for the judge. She just doesn't like getting on the perch, but an absolute massive thing. And that came from the blue, so the same cock, but this time paired. I'll show the hen so back from there. The birds that come down from that Barry Matthews line, they've done me fantastically well. Those birds at Barry Matthews, but going into the different two lines of white hen. So that was a bit of a success last year. Obviously culminated in the best young bird at London Southern. So it was a bit of a year of recessive last year. I know Barry got best in show when you were recessive last year, and we got best young bird with her. So really, really good.
Do you find her difficult to get ready for shows?
Her?
She's so much better, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean she wasn't perfect at the weekend. In fact, that was actually her take. I took that picture last night when I got back from the show, and you can see she's just not quite right there. To be honest, I didn't show her that much, and I'm not going to show her that much because she's not. Like I said, she's a judge's nightmare. She's not going to get. She's not a best in show bird because she's got that bit of tickling. She's not the style of bird certain judges like. She was never going to do that well yesterday, I don't think, because of the types of judges that were judging her. But she's just one of those. I think I'd just leave her caught up and just see when she gets picked. But
would you put a lot finer feather bird?
Yeah. So what I did this year is I paired her to him because that's their half brother and sister. So I kept the line together and I paired her to him. The problem is she laid 5 or 6 eggs, absolutely fine. The problem is he's so timid. I don't think he's ever going to breed. It was the right pair. The pair I wanted. As soon as I bred her, that was the pair I wanted to do. But he just isn't going to get there. The other option would have been to put her to his brother, but he dropped dead in the green cage this year, so he can't do that. So what I did do with her is I paired her to. I've got a really, really good grey cock that was one of those I didn't think would breed, and actually bred really well this year. So I thought, right, when he's finished, I'll give him around to her and they'll breed. So. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily put her to a fine feather cock, but I certainly want to put her to a cock with a bit of blow on. She's just got the curtains, and she's just all feather. And more so now. Actually, now she's a year older, even more so. Last year she was a bit more. She had a little bit more going on. Whereas now it's just great for her. But yeah, she's a monster of a hen. Certainly got a bit of attention over the weekend just gone, that's for sure. But just. So that then leads us nicely to this year. So how we did this year? So this year, as I say, we decided because of where we'd got to, we've got birds like that, we've got birds like that, we would decide to actually really push and go for all of the cages in that aviary to breed recessives. So from the green line, so the cock, the grey-green cock died. So the old grey-green cock finally died, which wasn't really a surprise. But obviously the two that I'd still kept were breeding, plus some of the young coming down from them. So I bred a few. The ones that I'm quite pleased with. This is an olive cock. I think, assuming he has a tail and he's a bit touch and go at the moment, I think he's going to be a little bit special. These are the two I talked about. So whenever I've had people over this year, I'll show off the recessives, and you'll see the recessive on the next page. But which I think is one of the best recessives I've ever bred, even better than her. But everybody raves about that one. They really, really like. When they see it in person, they've always, as a bar head, that was miles better. Even Emma said the same. That is better than the cobalt that are coming up. I said, no, it's not. It's not going to be better. But okay, we'll see what he mops out. And that is molted out, black as the Essex Pieds. I wouldn't even call it flecking. It's black. And that's the sister. She's coming out exactly the same, completely black. Now, whether they're going to molt it out, I did notice yesterday that it is, like I said, cleaning itself up a bit. but I don't think I'll ever be able to get them on the show bench. The green recessives is quite nice. That comes out of obviously the grey-green line. Because what I did breed off these, I haven't got pictures of, what I did breed off these last year were some nice olives, which I was showing at some of the rare shows, and the olives have bred these. So the olives. So that's where the line's still going from the green side. But on the blue side, which is obviously the bird that's really breeding me the better birds, like I say, I paired into this time I paired into a cinnamon cobalt this time, which was a hen that actually you were at the 2020 show. I don't think we were NBA, but at the 2020 show she won the CC there, and very nice hen. I paired that into the blue recessive. I bred that. So both of these. So cobalt recessive and a sky blue. I think there was a hen as well. But that was him as a baby, and that's him as he's molting now. And in total, as I say, we bred about 80 or so out of the aviary. And this being the third year off the blue recessive. But I think, I know, I'll get a lot of people really rate this hen that have seen it, especially when they see it in person. But I honestly think that this is going to be head and shoulders better than the fact, mainly because he's got style. He's a huge bird in length. He really is a huge bird. It's a cock, which is a bonus from a showing perspective, and from a recessive content perspective, is very good as well. So I do think that that's as close as I'm going to get to where I want to be for the short term. And when I compare the two, I know I still would prefer that one, but I don't think that's getting too far away from where I want to get to. Obviously, we'll see when it gets out on the show bench how good it really is, because you obviously always see your own birds a little bit better than they probably are. But I do think that's going to be something a little bit special. But we'll wait and see, and then we'll see how much further I've got to go till we get to that one on the left.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Sam, not long after, I mentioned that, and he said, he paired some from Brown Refuse into Balcaline. He said that they'd clicked on this side as well. So whether there's something there, I don't know, but that clicked really well. And the second bit of luck is the fact I've managed to keep hold of the two. I've got so many years out of the two I've got of Martin Halen. That's the other bit of luck.
That doesn't happen very often.
No, for example, I've had normals off Martin as well, and I've not really got anywhere with them. Not for no reason other than it just hasn't worked. Whereas with the recessives, it just has for some reason. So just a bit of luck. But you need that. You definitely need that bit of luck.
Where's your next outcross coming from? Where would you go if you could go in?
Back to Martin Halen. I'd definitely, if I could, because it's been 2 years now since I've got one. I haven't had because of COVID, and I probably am going to find that really difficult now with everything else, Brexit and all the rest. So that could be a real challenge. So if I put a nail in that one, so where else would I go? I think there's only probably one other place that to me has got recessives that would move them forwards if I wanted a recessive outcross, and that would be Alan and Jim. In fact, to be honest, I'd say they're better. They're better. I mean, I think they're better. They've got better birds than all. So probably Alan and Gina. But realistically, what we probably have to do, because as much as we get on really well around Gina, and have bought recessives off them and all the rest of it, I don't think they'll get what I need. I'd probably have to go and try and find some normals and bring them in that way.
Do you think you've got the quality and depth on the recessive pieds that you want?
No, not yet.
How many more years?
if they breathe the way they've been going, and one thing I am a little bit worried about is, so I've still got him, but he's now in the breeding cage until he drops, because I don't think he's got long left. I've got her, wherever she's gone, but she's not. I don't think she's going to breed, although she's loud. I don't think she'll breed. I've now got him. Hopefully, he will be the. If I lose him, I think I could go back quite quickly because.
That's your next foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't. I haven't got lots of birds off him that are breeding. And I've got him, but I don't think he's going to breed either. I've lost that one, so that worries me a little bit. The green line I'm okay, but I'm worried because of the feather problems. That if I'm not careful, that could cause an issue. So it all ironically, it all comes down to him, I think. If he breeds well, and I get a good couple of years off him, then I think in a couple of years I could have 20 pairs that I'm happy with. At the minute I've got half that probably. And I look at the young where I am now. I've got so just take this year. And I've actually written, I've written a list and said, right, I want 10 cocks in the recessive line, babies this year that I'm going to use, that I want, that are good enough, they're going to move me forwards, which will mean I've got half my cages of babies. And that list is not full. But I have got, although it's black, 1, 2, 3, the blue and the cobra in particular, there's 5 that definitely could move me forward, so, or keep me going in the right direction. But yeah, it is. I think it's not good to have it all hanging on one bird, but I do think that's going to be the key bird.
Do you run your cocks with more than one hen in a season?
In a season, yes, but not at the same time.
Not at the same time?
No, I've not. I'm not disciplined enough to do it. No, I've dabbled with it, but I'm just not disciplined enough to do it.
The trouble with doing that, you can go from being very good to virtually zero in a couple of seasons.
I would prefer.
If you rely on a couple of real good cockbirds and they don't perform, and you're running with 5 or 6 hens, all of a sudden your season's a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. I would prefer to try and get as many out of him. Move the eggs, move the young, do whatever I can, get as many rounds out of him rather than bring him with 2 hens at the same time. Just because I haven't got enough experience to do it. I don't want to risk. I wouldn't want to risk it. But I would be happy to. Get them going and move them quite quickly. I mean, I was unfortunate. The downfall this year was they were the first round. The second round, I lost everything off in the second round. So I didn't get loads off him, which was a bit unfortunate. But like I think that's partly down to the fact that I think he's getting old now. He's just really now. So I've got to keep telling myself not to push him too hard on the show bench either, or else I could end up doing it to myself.
That's great. Well, thanks again, Adrian. That's really brilliant. Thank you very much. Right. Does anybody want a cup?